A very good evening. You're watching yet another edition of the Face to Face, where we dive deeper into Sri Lanka's political arena. I'm Mariam Gunavijaya, and our guest this evening is a member of the executive committee of the Jathika Jana Balawega, or the National People's Power, Vrai Balthazaar. A very good evening, Vrai, and welcome to the show.
Good evening.
I think bringing Vrai into the show is quite timely, since we are talking about women in politics this evening, and the Jathika Jana Balawega saw quite the events unfold earlier this week with the police firing water cannons at JJB protest that was held earlier this week, right? Speaking of this particular incident that unfolded, what is your party's stance on the whole thing? Because we saw the police react, we saw the people react. What is your party's stance, especially the leader, Andra Kumar Dissanayake?
Sure. So, Mariam, what actually unfolded on the day, just so for some background information, as you know, it's budgets in Parliament, and it has been so for a couple of weeks. And on that particular day, on Monday, what was being discussed were allocations for women and for children, and so it was very pertinent, especially at a time that the government has made huge, drastic cuts for women and children. We felt it was necessary for us to protest. It is a basic right, and so there were, I think, over 1,000 of us gathered very peacefully. We had slogans, we carried our boards, and we really wanted to be heard, because we feel like those in Parliament don't necessarily represent our values and our needs, especially as women, and we wanted to be able to do that. And so we had gathered at the Polduwa Junction, just around the around the pavement, which I know a lot of people in their minds can imagine that space. So we were just there, and we moved to the middle aisle thereafter, as Dr. Harini Amarasuriya, she had spoken to us. Usually when any kind of political when we do protest, we a few of us do speak. So Harini had spoken, and she said, the future of this country is in the hands of women. We need to take this forward, and was actually bidding everyone goodbye and saying Jaya Veva when we were attacked, and it was unannounced. I think that is. When we talk of protesting, there's usually some level of protocol, Mariam. It's very regular. As someone who's been to multiple protests over so many years, there is some protocol, even though it is unjust and wrong. There is some protocol. There's usually an announcement made, but this was without warning. They also had brought in, there were forces there, armed forces, and it was very, very. It was absolutely. It was vile. There was absolutely no reason to do it. We weren't marching towards the Parliament. I saw that there were multiple kind of news alerts that went out saying that we were marching towards Parliament. We had no intention. We had stated our piece, and we were moving out. And Harini, I think, went back to Parliament afterwards and gave a very strong speech about what it meant to be a woman on a day that we were we are on a day that we are allocating budgets for women. And she asked a very pertinent question. She said, look at who is present in Parliament as we talk about women. She said there are only two others in the opposition, from the government, who are listening in. Only two. And I think it really begs a question. Women are the larger majority of the population. We're the larger voter base, but who cares for the needs of women? Where are we? We can talk about policy on one level, but where are the people? Where are our leaders, our country's leaders? Where are they listening to it? And I think those are the questions. So it was unprovoked. We were unarmed. We weren't marching towards the Parliament, and it was our basic right. And so it was truly vile and disgusting. The whole unfolding of events was.
Yeah, but you mentioned about how Dr. Harini Amarasuriya, representing your party, spoke in Parliament. What about the male representation? What did they have to say in Parliament? Did they speak for you? Because I don't think I saw a lot of reports about this.
I think, it's also interesting how the media always carries stories. But I think there was, in terms of our party, I think our stance is, irrespective of who it is, we've been very everyone in our party is on the same stance. So I don't think within our party there's no male, I mean, there's no necessity to say the males also condemn this act and the women also condemn this act. In total, we condemn it. But it was Harini's day to speak in Parliament, which is why she had condemned it. And I think across the board, across party lines also, there were those who were saying that this is not done because it was so unjust.
So now you spoke about the female representation in Parliament, and you spoke about the female population. Now we are almost in the last month of 2023, heading towards 2024. That means it marks 2 decades since Sri Lanka got the first female president, Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga, and still, even having 52% of female population and so much happening in the country, in the world, about female empowerment and all of that stuff, only 5% of female representation is in our country's parliament. Why do you think that is an issue? Why do you think is the other challenges when it comes to female entering politics or parliament in specific?
Yeah, I think there are in politics, in parliament specifically, yes, but also to engage in politics for women is, I think if you just come to the very basic of it, politics is something that has always been in Sri Lanka and also again in a lot of South Asian countries. Women are distanced from politics because we are told that politics is not a place for women to be. It's a very patriarchal place, it's a very violent place, it's an ugly place, and certainly good women, don't engage in politics. And so it starts off with that kind of thinking and that kind of setup that we as women then try to engage in. And I'm not saying just running for elections, but even engaging in politics as someone who's protesting, right? There are so many barriers, there's so many distances. And then of course, as you try to engage more and more, not just as a protester, but say as a local government representative, then you have party politics and those dynamics in which in most cases women aren't seen as credible or as seen as good front runners, right? In many cases women also, there's an issue of financing where women aren't able to run because they have financial constraints, because mostly unless they come from families that have the means to, or they come from political dynasties. So there are all these kinds of concerns. I think for us as Jathika Jana Balawegaya, things are very different because we come from a left political background which enables women, shares that platform for women. But the majority of women who are looking to engage, I think, have those struggles because of how society and how, in the structures that exist. So certainly if a woman is looking to run for local government or Pradesh Sabha or for parliament, it's a huge uphill task. It's a very difficult thing to do, and it's not easy for multiple reasons. It's so layered.
Okay, so when we speak about generational stuff now, regardless, okay, let's put aside the female representation now. It's the 21st century, right? But I don't think I hear any little girl say that she wants to one day grow up and become a politician, or even aim higher and say that she wants to become a president one day. Why do you think we have a problem like that? And let alone little girls, I don't even hear the youth say that. I think that's a problem. And what can we do to actually encourage these little girls and the young girls to one day end up representing our female population and take up leadership roles?
Sure, I think it's a great question, Mariam, because the short answer is patriarchy, which is, I know, a loaded answer. But if you break it down, girls are seldom taught that we are leaders. Right? We're not taught, and this is something we say now that we as Jathika Jana Balawegaya, we're going out, we're talking to women and asking them to kind of tap into their own leadership, their own abilities and capacities to be leaders, because I don't think we've ever been taught that. We're not taught that in school, we're not taught that by our families, we're not taught about it within our corporate spaces or in our workspaces in general, and I think there is really women haven't been able to grow into themselves because we're taught to be good wives and good mothers, and that has been the scope of what we've been taught to do.
So are you saying that they think that we can't balance both?
This idea or this notion of balance is also very interesting in that we will never ask, I think, say we go in for an interview quite often, or I go in for some kind of event. quite often I get asked, well, who is taking care of the kids, or how do you balance this? And the answer quite often is that there's no balance. You ask a man that, there's never a balance, right? But the expectation for women is that we manage and we juggle, and it's there is an unfairness in how we position women in those spaces. So yes, we need to be reminding girls and we need to be reminding women that they have power. We see that in particular now, as the Jathika Jana Balawegaya, we're going out and we are establishing women's councils across the island in all 25 districts. One of the things that we're telling women, which is so true, is that they already are in leadership roles. If you go to their schools, they are running the school PTAs and things like that. If it's a temple, they are a part of, they are managing in all their temple or church or whatever, they are managing so many of the activities. If you look at their Sanasa Samitis or their Kanta Samitis or the Maranadhara Samitis, whatever the Samitis are, it's women who fill those spaces. But when it comes to, and there are lots of politics in those spaces also, but when it comes to kind of party politics, there is apprehension, and that is because a lot of parties also have not been structured in a way that they absorb women. And I'm not saying you necessarily even out the playing field, but you have to be able to change structures when you include women. To truly include women, you have to be able to do that. And so I might have diverted a little bit from your question. I think we need to remind women and girls that they have the capacity to be leaders.
What about the Jathika Jana Balawegaya? We only see Harini Amarasuri represented in Parliament. Is your party also the same?
I don't think we are, and I think myself and a whole group of others are testimony to the fact that the NPP, yes, Harini was the first. I mean, we have only 3 seats in Parliament. The one seat that we had, which is a national seat, was given to Harini, who is obviously represents women, but also everyone in general. So we have representation there. And I think the Jathika Jana Balawegaya, the NPP, at the time when we made that decision, I think it really changed also perceptions of people, because it was a real indication about the line that we wanted to take as a party, which was progressive, which was looking at being a lot more inclusive. And so it's not just about words here, because they're very easy to throw around and say we're inclusive, we're gender sensitive. It's so easy to say that, right? But what does that mean in terms of structures, Mariam? What does that mean inside a party? What changes, right? So for us, it's been the Jathika Jana Balawegaya came in. I mean, we were a party that established in 2019, so we're relatively a newer party. But for us, it's been looking at our structures, trying to see when we include women. It's not enough, Mariam, to go around saying more women should join politics. It's so, we have the platform here, you come join. That's very easy. When women enter politics, because we come from a place where, again, leadership isn't told to us. Financing is an issue, where all of these other issues already exist, pre-existing conditions. We need to understand then how do we build equity for women. And I think a lot of that includes understanding women's lives and their roles as mothers, as wives, as caregivers, not kind of romanticizing those roles. And that's not what I mean by understanding them, because I think there's enough romanticization. This is not to romanticize it, but this is to understand the brunt of that work. So if a woman is getting into politics, you have to understand and support her home also, right? And I know this may sound completely difficult to kind of wrap your head around, but it means enabling a lot of hand-holding. It means understanding capacities. It means very simple things. Some things like changing around times of meetings so that women are able to meet at a time that is convenient to them, as opposed to convenient to the majority of people, who might be men in the space. There are things that we have to be flexible with, and I think our party has been working at it very hard and learning. And as a result, it's not just Harini you're seeing today. You're seeing many others who are now being pushed up into the national ranks in the party, many others who are now taking on ranks within the district, many others who are locally, women who have never engaged in politics, now being a part of Kanta Sabhas in their ward, saying, yes, I am now a leader and I am going to do whatever I can within my capacity.
It's the 21st century, and I think a lot of people are in the mindset that people have started to kind of accept women into like the whole leadership role situation. And I think feminism is quite the topic, not only in the country but across the globe. Don't you think there has been a generational shift in the attitude when it comes to women in politics? Don't you think that the political arena has had an impact because of this? Do you not believe that men have become more welcoming when it comes to women in politics?
I mean, if you look at our parliament now, I don't think our parliament as a whole is more welcoming to women.
Okay.
I think our party is welcoming to women. I don't think the parliament, I mean, it is violent.
So just your party? Everyone else, including the opposition and everyone else, is against?
I believe that there are other people within the parliament who are perhaps progressive and perhaps who see the need and understand why it's important to have women in parliament and women in places of representation. I don't doubt that for a second. But in terms of structure, party structures, I think I think we are definitely we are very progressive in that sense. But I don't think the parliament or even local government institutions, if you look at them and how they function, they are not very conducive spaces for women. Yes, it is a 21st century. Yes, we should be more progressive. Yes, we should have more people. Equal representation shouldn't even be a thing. Mm-hmm. But as you quite rightly pointed out, we are 5.3% in parliament, just 12 women, the majority of whom also come from family dynasties, which isn't necessarily the problem. The problem is if parties only have women who come in from family backgrounds, and that is the only thing that they foster, or that is the only kind of women leadership that they care for. And if they're not looking at grassroots levels, if they're not looking at if they're not understanding the needs of the regular women of this country, the majority of this country, the women who who work very hard to eke out an existence, the women whose care work, whose work at home enable an economy to run, who are completely unsupported. Unless we're looking at those women in particular and understanding that, then I don't think we're good feminists, or I don't think we're good politicians.
All right. So we're speaking about parliament representation, but what do you think would be different now? There are certain things that I think would be best fit, like you and I sitting together to speak about women politics instead of the show having a male host or having a male guest on the show. I think
I'm very happy to see you today.
You and I doing it, I think, makes so much more sense. Just like that, what do you think would be a unique perspective or attitude of a woman coming in to play a particular role? What are the gaps in the system that must be filled to make sure that that happens?
Sure. So, I mean, when you're talking again of women in politics, I don't think it's enough to say this token representation is enough. I think we've already had at local government level, there's been a quota. Affirmative action has its pluses. It's for a country like us, it's definitely been a good way to kickstart women's inclusion, because up until that point it was less than 2.8%. Since local government existed for over 60 years, there was no until the quota system was enacted, women weren't actively participating despite the spaces at other political parties, because of those kind of structural issues I talked about, because of finances, social issues, violence. I think violence is a huge portion, where women just don't want to engage because it's they are told it's not a nice space, and it really isn't a nice space. I don't think anyone really wants to go and sit in parliament even to watch any kind of debate, or the school children go into the gallery and watch the proceedings in parliament, and quite often it's horrendous what people talk about, how they behave. I mean, just today, if you look at what was discussed in parliament.
But how can that be changed?
I think it isn't enough to say, Mariam, that yes, we just having 50% of women in parliament alone will change it. I think we need women who understand the role of women, and we also need men who are allies, who understand the importance of that kind of equal representation. So I don't think it's enough to say just having X number of women will change the system, right? And I think looking at it in that sense isn't always right, because you do have women's representation in parliament. Even if it's very small, it doesn't mean that that very small group even necessarily represent the needs of or the aspirations of women. If you're talking about say period poverty, but you're putting that up against national defense and say, you know, this doesn't matter but this matters, then I think you're also still, you know, part of this very patriarchal way of looking at of looking at as a woman you can still be you know, a contributor to the patriarchy. So I think there is a problem there. What should change is, well, education. If education changes, if the way in which women understand themselves change, if the way in which we understand our bodies, our capacities, I think if all of that changes, which requires a huge reimagination of everything that we do right now, I think that is what will truly enable. But I will also say this, repression is also changing how women now engage in politics, because it's no longer, women are no longer, Mariam, interested in sitting at home and saying, you know, politics has nothing to do with me, my life is non-political, let other people, you know, I'll go vote, but beyond that I don't care. Because now women are being able to connect the dots, and I think that is the most incredible change that we've seen, in particular since last year with the Aragalaya, with the People's Uprising, with people now trying to understand that politics does play a huge role in our lives. The cup of tea we drink, our plate of rice, what our children take to school, how they travel, where they school, what medication I have access to, all of this is now political. And women being able to connect those dots and say, my life is now, not just women in general, I mean men and women both, but in particular, because the crisis is felt so much at home, the burden of care work is felt so much at home. I'll give you a quick example. You know, we talk of the economic crisis, which is usually in newsrooms or in political forums, usually discussed with numbers and statistics, right? But when we talk to women, it's different. It is truly a lived experience, right? If you had a liquidizer at home, you've now packed it into a box and put it away, and you're back to using your hands for coconut milk. If you had a washing machine, you've put that away, you know, except for the big sheets, and you're back to washing clothes by hand, right? These are very real experiences for people women who've fought hard to try to, you know, to have space in their lives, or to find things to make their lives easier, and they've gone back because of the electricity bill hikes, because of their inability to manage things. Women who are now forced to, you know, pawn jewelry. This year in particular is the year in which there's a record-breaking statistic for pawning gold, right? Women are now pawning their jewelry just to be able to pay off a light bill, just to be able to eat for the next week, just because they also don't want to get into arguments with their husbands at home. It's incredible how much more active women are in the political space as we see it now, and we can see it. There are areas in which we've gone to that we've not been able to gather in the past, like 10-15 people, and now we gather 200 women in one sitting. Women only, simply because they understand that they now have the power to change it.
So your term education, do you think the mindsets have developed now?
Like I said, education is one way, repression is another way to teach people, and I think people are now understanding that that is their reality. And unless they take charge, unless us women also become politically invested in understanding what it means, that it's not just being in some samitiya and taking 10 kilos of rice or taking 2 cement packs back home. But it means, what politics means is something much larger. That kind of education or that kind of mind shift, I think, is changing. We see it now. And so this is maybe a very early prediction, but women have always, I mean, if you looked at it, because we are 56% of the voter base, it's always been the women who've decided the leaders of this country. And now we can see where that's heading.
So if we have always been the ones who have decided the leaders of the country, is it a mistake on our part?
Yes, it is. Okay. It is. We have this is what we say, if we want to remedy it, then who also, if we've made mistakes, now we want to remedy it, then who takes a bigger role? And it has to still be us, and it has to be us not just ticking off, just not just voting for someone, but understanding consciously why we are making this vote, despite not receiving the 10 kilos of rice or the 10,000 rupees. This is why.
So you were speaking about the Samiti, the councils and everything that you all have been doing. Now, Rai from Bhatt, I know you have been doing a lot of volunteering. Do you think that these grassroots movements have made a change in the people's mindsets in Sri Lanka? The women, have they come more forward once you all have started doing things like this?
In certain areas, yes. Again, I'm not going to romanticize it because, it's very, very difficult for people to live right now, right? I work in the capacity as a politician also, but I also work as a researcher. And I know not everyone has the same access to understanding politics in the same way, right? It's very, very difficult for women, I think, at this point, families right now, given the cost of living, right, the rising cost of living. We are not earning any more than we did last year, right? So there is this discrepancy. There is some, as much as I want to say everything has changed, there are still areas that definitely will be a little more harder over time. I think we will have to see how that changes. It's not easy. Not everyone has access in the same way.
Right. I just want to switch for a second to the global arena and talk about that, because our country has been, been at the COP28 for speaking on climate summits, and we've been representing our country in the international community quite a lot these days. But how do you, because from whatever the statistics that I have seen, I think female representation even across the globe is quite minute compared to it was back in the day, or it is supposed to be right now. Why do you think there is an issue like this? Do you think that we could come forward and do better in international relations to ensure that female empowerment is met?
I think from the perspective of Sri Lankans being represented globally, is that the question? Yeah. So yes, I think that is certainly a place in which we can definitely do better in. But for that to change, then we need leaders who are willing to accept that women should be equally represented in spaces, right? And so that means not just represented as token representation again, but women who are actively making decisions in those spaces, right? And I think for the better part, politics has been a boys' club, and decision making happens.
So we are not giving them leadership roles.
Decision making happens within those boys' clubs.
Because,
and so,
just to interrupt you for a
Sure.
second, our neighboring country, India. The president there is a female, and Bangladesh that we work with, the prime minister is a female. So why do you think this boys club issue only persists in Sri Lanka?
It's actually not just a Sri Lankan problem, it is a South Asian problem. I mean, we've also had female leaders, right?
But Bangladesh and India in South Asia.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I mean. They've also had representation that is female. We've also had representation that is female. But it doesn't necessarily mean that there is equal representation, or that women are equally treated in those countries, or that women have more access to services. You may have someone who has a position of power, but it doesn't necessarily mean that women are treated equally or have equal access, or are given the same, afforded the same rights as a citizen of the country. That is what we should also be looking at, not just saying we have a leader who is female and therefore everything is hunky-dory. I think that is not the way in which we need to be looking at it. As much as we need to have women leaders who are empathetic, who are able to progressively change the kind of very patriarchal ways in which laws over the years have been very kind of archaic laws that have existed in this country, that don't benefit women, that keep women away from certain things, that also that just don't help women progress. We also need to look at other kinds of larger structural changes. So it doesn't help, not just with anything. It doesn't help to have just one leader who is able to change that. I think you need a good team of people who are able to make that change. And I think that is irrespective of gender. You need a team that understands that, not just one person.
Right, that was our discussion on women in politics, and we had a member of the Executive Committee of the Jatika Jana Balawege, or the National People's Power, Vrai Balthazaar, with us today. Thank you so much, Vrai, for joining us. And maybe next time when we meet for a discussion, women in politics will be a much more comfortable topic for us to speak on, and it would be so much more better for the female representation in our country and the female population, of course. And I wouldn't have to see you after a whole situation that unfolded where Sri Lankan women were attacked by the police force in the country.
I hope so too, and I really do hope that women understand how powerful they are, and that they take on larger leadership roles, and that we meet under much better circumstances.
Right.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Rai. And that's a wrap of Face to Face on TV1 for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Have yourself a great evening.